On behalf of the Eyes on Earth Consortium, a warm welcome to the online edition of the Eyes on Earth Roadshow. My name is Martijn Seiger and I'm your host this afternoon and tomorrow. In the coming days, we will inform you about satellite data applications and especially about the Copernicus system. In this session, you will learn about the Copernicus Emergency Management Services. The presenter of this session is Mr. Igor Magdalenic, President of the Croatian Crisis Management Association. During this session, you will have the opportunity to submit your questions in the text box on your screen. A selection of questions will be answered after the presentation. Igor, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, my name is Igor. I'm from Croatian Crisis Management Association and also Red Cross Emergency Team and National Civil Protection Model for Tactical Support. Today I will talk about Copernicus in support of crisis management and use cases we had in Croatia for the last few years. So that includes Copernicus Emergency Management Service used by civil protection authorities, but also Copernicus Open Data that can be used by everyone. The use cases are floods, the forest fires and the recent Zagreb Earthquake. I will also mention the value of Copernicus data in changing the paradigm from disaster management to disaster risk management and how it made possible a revolution in whole crisis management sphere. The image below is a flooded area from 2014 in Croatia. It's a radar image, Sentinel-1. There was a big flood, the first disaster since we got our independence, and the first time we used Copernicus maps in field operations. It was a really big flood. It affected a few countries. This image below shows Copernicus maps in our briefing room. That was the headquarters for field operations, and back then we didn't know much about satellites, how they work, how these maps are produced, but very quickly we learned their value and how to use it in field operations. It made possible to have a bigger picture of the affected area, and above you can see the flooded area, and in the square is the most heavily populated area when we tried on a picture down to save a few villages. Zagreb, host of this conference, is a city on a river. It have a high flood risk also, and this was the great flood of 1964 that flooded the third of the city. There was a lot of damages on assets. It nearly a long time for city to recover. And after that, people start thinking how to make prevention better, what when can use. In today's time, we can use Copernicus Services. On this video, you can see the flood exposure for the city of Zagreb using Copernicus data, data from Joint Research Center, and also 3D model from the city's Office of Strategic Planning and Development. It's practical tool to show possible effect of flood on the city assets that makes easier people to understand what could possibly happen and to plan ahead and develop the civil protection plans. Forest fire season 2017 was really a tough year for the whole world. It was the fires everywhere. That season changed the world and implemented the term new normal into public sphere, and it was the year when we used all the data we can get to help firefighters and to give some information to the local population and to see how to do the really hard job somewhat easier. This image shows one of the worst week during that season. Nearly half of the coastline was on fire simultaneously, and situational awareness in that situation is really important to know how to manage your resources, where to send the firefighters, firefighting plans, and all data that can be used are used in such situations. Below is fire weather index by EFIS. On that week, you can see the high and lower fire hazard. It's basically some of the daily risk map. You can see what you can expect tomorrow, make some preparedness. Firefighters know that the next few days will be really difficult. They can expect fires. There is a high probability in some areas. And that was the data we all implemented that year. Other countries did the same. We learned from them, they learned from us. We exchanged information during the whole season, and that was the season of learning lesson and implementation of Copernicus Services. Above is a picture of the byproduct of fires. It's a PM10 particles. They can be really harmful to human health, and that was something new for us back then. We get that information, but we didn't know how to put it immediately in operational value on that, because Copernicus is slightly ahead of time, and when you see what you can do in that, it takes time for the system to adapt to the new information, to be implemented in the standardized procedures. And it's easier to find something new than to make it practical. Images like this nowadays are completely normal, but back then it was something new. Also, some other things from EFIS, the European Forest Fire Information System. It really showed a great value during that year and all years after that. But this was one of the first maps we produced back then. It's very simple. It's nothing special, but in crisis management, the time is the key. So it don't have to look beautiful. It needs to have some value. You can send images like this are sent to firefighters on the field, and they also learned quickly the value of situational awareness produced by satellites, because when you have multiple fires on the area, it's very hard to make some assessment with drones or planes, and only satellite can cover a really large area. This is fire detection made by infrared sensors on the satellites. When satellite passes, it's really fast. You can download all the data and put it on a map. It showed really practical, and below is fire weather index from EFIS compared on the right with land surface temperature measured by Sentinel-3. And that's the beauty of Copernicus data. You can see some similarities. If you have time, you can see there is some connection between the surface temperature and the fire index, and you can play with data, and every day you can learn something new. Split fire in 2017 was the biggest fire and most dangerous one. The city Split is the second largest city in Croatia, and the fire started afternoon. You can see the image from Sentinel-2 at the beginning, and during evening the strong wind started and the fires entered the city. It was very difficult situation because it was dark, situational awareness was low, firefighting planes can't fly at night, you have a big problems with drones to get some awareness during the night. It's very hard to use them, and infrared sensors show their value. This picture below is about 1 a.m. During the night when the satellite passed. It made a detection. This was the result, and this image was sent to the firefighters. It showed that the fire was endangering a small suburb village near the city, and basically provide really valuable information. You can see on the right the news portals started to share raw FS data in 2 a.m. In the middle of the night, because there was very little reliable information at the time. Also, a lot of people called from the area wanting to know more what's going on, are they safe, and it was a really difficult situation where infrared sensors really showed its value, because until morning the fire was put under control, there was no human casualties, and everything ended up really fine. These two images show the aftermath of the fire. Below is the FS burn area algorithm. It's a preliminary damage assessment. It shows you basically the area that is affected by fire, and like first damage assessment, it shows really good accuracy. Above is the more detailed analysis when you have more time. It's combined two Sentinel-2 images before and after the fire, and basically you measure the change in vegetation. This picture shows the burn severity of the vegetation and the area affected. After that, you can put it in the video, and that makes better to see the whole area and how the fire spread during the time. The more red means more burnt, and the less red means less burnt. You can see also how the fire entered the city, their path, and how the slopes in terrain can affect the fire spread. The similar thing can be used with sentinels, is to monitor the reforestation or the recovery phase, how trees are coming back, planting new ones, and it's a really valuable information. And people also better understand the effect of the fire when put in such animations. In 2018, there was a little less fires, but still there was a lot of them, and you can see here the fire on the Pelješac Peninsula, seen by Sentinel-2 natural colors above, and below is the AO browser, a practical tool from Sentinel Hub using Pierre Mercur's wildfire script that amplifies the infrared signature. You can clearly see the intensity of the fire and how close it is to the town, and it was a really dangerous situation. Some evacuations were made, and also in the suburbs a few houses were burned. If you use more analytical tools like Snap, you can compare two images before and after, like a split example, and it's easy to extract the burnt area and put it in another tools. So you can see the whole peninsula and the burn area on the picture below. On this video is better shown how terrain is affecting the fire, and also how near it was to the town. It was a really large area, and firefighters really had a big trouble to make interventions on the health. So analysis like this helps you after the fire also to make damage assessment, how it will be caused, how to repair it, and things like that. The important part I would like to mention is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. It's a global agreement between most of the countries to reduce disaster risks, and Copernicus showed its really value supporting that agreement. I pull up some priorities that can be used by Copernicus with the help of Copernicus, like relevant data and practical information, easy to disseminate, and easy to make periodically disaster risk assessment. Also, you can have all the data you need about certain area, like the vulnerability, exposure, hazards on the area, their characteristic, and possible cascading effects. Also, you can use it with the data of the population, assets, combine it in really different ways, like in line with national circumstances, and important is location-based disaster risk information. Space data is geographic information. Basically, all maps you have, they have location-based information. That it's really easy to understand. If you do it locally, the local population will have additional will to do something about it. It's easier to make some prevention measures, and it's easier for decision makers to make some decisions. Also, real-time access. Every year there are more and more satellites, more and more data. You can combine it with geographic information system. It's natural compatible, and all this is a great value of Copernicus data in all this risk reduction. I will mention few examples in Croatia for the forest fires. So this is the Copernicus Risk and Recovery product. It showed the area, selected area, and you can see there are most of them are southern islands. It's because firefighting interventions are very hard on the islands. If it's a big fire, it takes time for the firefighters from mainland to come and help. Also, planes need to travel further. And prevention is the key. Prevention is the key. If fire starts, to reduce the consequences and to buy time to make a response efficient. So, main categories of this product was forest fires, exposure and risk. On the image below, you can see the island's natural park Lastovo. It's a beautiful island. This is exposure to fire. I would recommend if you have a boat to visit it, but until then we must protect it not to burn, and this is the high exposure area on the island that can be implemented prevention measures to reduce the possible consequences of the fires. Also, there are a lot of information produced for the first responders and the emergency services, and proposed mitigation measures in high-risk areas. This is one example of the fire I mentioned before on the Pelješac Peninsula. So risk assessment was conducted in 2017, and the burned area for 2018. This is in this picture. When you have the location-based information, it's really easy to understand what the risk above is, where is the high risk, and compared to burnt area below the year later, you can see how this risk assessment can be reliable and show the high accuracy. This is a really strong argument in doing risk assessment supported by the Copernicus, and the picture we use a lot. So in this video you see the city of Dubrovnik, one of the most famous city in Croatia, fire exposure to the city and the vulnerability of the transportation network. Also, there are a few places determined for the evacuation, and all the tourist data was taken into account to determine the possible not-through roads, to not to endanger even more by evacuation. If you're conducting evacuation, you need to use safe roads with enough capacity to make people evacuation safe. So these are exposure layers to the wildfires, mostly by forest around the city. Vulnerability is one of the most important layers because it shows the possible impact on the area and how vulnerable the area is. There are two categories, urban and non-urban. Non-urban areas are divided into four different vegetation categories. How can fire affect them, how can easily they spread fire, and also in the urban areas, population and assets are the main category. Population numbers, so you must take tourists also into account with the local population, and made two risk layers for the low and high risk season. The tourist numbers that are often forgotten can really affect the risk level. Also number of buildings and how dense they are, vulnerability to the disruption of the transportation network, and what is really important is identification of not-through evacuation roads. On this picture you can see how terrain can affect the vulnerability. The mountains above the Makarska city, and below is the tourist part of the Dubrovnik. You can see the hotels in blue and how can they affect the transportation network in case of evacuation. When you get all the data together, you get the final risk, and this video is showing the risk of the southern part of Croatia, used for mitigation and for risk information for local population to know their areas, to do something about it, for decision makers to do something, and also to make better information about all the area. You can see here, this is also Makarska, and there's mountains and how risk is affected by the mountains and vegetation on that part, and also the islands on the southern islands in Croatia. So, the purpose of the risk assessment is to reduce risk after that. So there are risk management zones. You can see this in these pictures. That are zones that need some improvement with the vegetation to stop fire. In a case of fire, to stop entering the inhabited areas. So you practically made a buffer zone around 20 to 30 meters, and even if there is a fire, it will stop and it wouldn't enter small villages or towns. So this is the most important part of the risk assessment process, is to do something about it. Documents like this, that is all in one document, are really helpful in bridging the knowing-doing gap, and Copernicus is really great for that purpose. Zagreb earthquake that occurred on 22nd of March was the strongest earthquake in the last 140 years. And it all happened during COVID pandemic crisis. And what to do in such situation? How earthquake and pandemic mix together, and is it a nightmare scenario? So there are many questions after the earthquake. So how to evacuate people? How to maintain social distancing in evacuation, and what to do with people in isolation? How to conduct a damage assessment around the city, how first responders to respond, teams on the field, and all of that. How to collect information without too many human contact. What to do and how to organize things. So situational awareness is a key here. In remote sensing is remote by default. So satellites and drones did a great job together with the in-situ data collected from the terrain, and Holy Trinity of situational awareness in crisis situation usually includes satellites, drone, and in-situ data. So how it was done, and how was data collected, how was made online system that is robust enough to endure all of that, and also to provide reliable information to making decision, and also do it really fast. So on this picture you can see a drone footage. This is the day of the earthquake, few hours after, and you can also see it started to snow. So it was a really bad day, and after that it started a strong wind. There was worries about falling materials from the buildings. It wasn't complete clear situations of the affected areas around the city, what exactly damage was, but we knew there is a little time to get all the information possible we can get, and to make some decisions and not to make a bad situation even worse. So in this video you can see interferogram from Sentinel-1 satellite detecting ground movement before and after the earthquake. You can see the crater here. This is the epicenter of the earthquake, and the blue colors means that after the earthquake the ground moved away from the sensor, and the red it means it's closer. So with this information you can have some preliminary assumptions, what's going on, how the ground moved, how can it impacted the buildings, and what to focus attention, and make some preliminary assumptions. Parallel with that, there was put in place online survey because of the social distancing, like this conference is also online. So the same methodology. This was done by survey 123 for ArcGIS because it have strong servers and can maintain a lot of data, input data coming from the citizens. This is the density of requests from from citizens for a rapid damage assessment of their buildings, and you can see the city center is affected mostly. There are a lot of people there, but also a lot of the buildings are damaged. Also, the area around near the epicenter was mostly affected, and there was a lot of heavily damaged buildings in that part of the city. Below there is a heat map from the same data. You can see basically the same information in the different way. All these visualization are used to making decisions, to determine what priorities are, where to send damage assessment teams, and so on. This is the dashboard in the Earthquake Operation Center. It's real-time data coming from the damage assessment teams. It's gone every of these points. There are about 35,000 of them requests, and building inspections and other data, critical infrastructure, impact, and a lot of other things. Parallel with that, there are also monitoring of firefighter intervention. The civil protection teams are also on the field all around the city, and there are a lot of people who could easily spread the virus. They can get infected, they can go into people's buildings, look for damages, infect other people, and this is all a nightmare scenario we try to avoid. We didn't know at the start how these all activities will have a final impact on the epidemics, but we tried our best not to make things even worse. Below is an image of the dashboards used in operation centers. That was our headquarters for the earthquake. You can see this image is taken when 18,000 inspections were done. That was a really great job. And above is drone footage taken constantly to assess remaining risk from falling materials, to see the changes. A lot of people started to repair their buildings. There was a new footage to compare it with the week before, and also you can see a 3D model of the city shown before in a flood example, but this time it has the damage assessment pinned to every building. So a few days, this was the preliminary damage assessment, the first one after the earthquake, and it's collected from a lot of data from the drones mostly, and from the damage assessment teams. It showed basically the city center. There are no suburbs here in this image, but that was our focus, because most of the buildings were in the city center, and with this map we could select some blocks with high priority, low priority, and how to evacuate people. So this is the evacuation. This was the first day the temporary shelters were put in place. And evacuation was done by case because of the social distancing. You can't do it 100 people at the same time. You don't know if someone is infected, how will be infected. If you take 100 people and put them somewhere, and after a few days they are all infected, you did a really bad job. So it was done case by case, and this map showed the areas in the city where people are evacuated from. This is remote sensing support from the air. So Copernicus Services and a drone service from Croatian Mountain Service. They are specialized in saving tourists when they go too far in the mountains, but they also have a great drone service, and these drones are heavily used during Zagreb Earthquake to get orthophoto and other images from the drones. The drones are used to look off the roofs and destroy chimneys. There are about 4,000 and some destroyed chimneys around the city, and all of them are some sort of danger to the population, because it can fell off on someone, and these objects needed to be removed really quickly. The other danger is aftershocks. After all big quakes, there are lots and lots of aftershocks, and people are getting scared really easily of them. But there are more bigger worries if damaged buildings will collapse, or some of these materials from roof will hurt someone or kill them. So above is reconstruction monitoring done by Copernicus Emergency Management Service risk and recovery. That image also uses the drone footage from below, and they made the analysis of the city center and monitoring of the situations. This is our damage assessment teams. They are structural engineers from the fields of construction, and they are managed all around the city via collector application and also workforce application from RGRS. It's a real-time application, and you really needed to maintain safety of the citizens and our teams not to get infected. And here on this image you can see teams around the city center working on damage assessment, and we have every location of them. We know where they are, where they're going, and are there any infected people around them, and how to behave in such situation. It is really helpful that citizens themselves on the online survey write about they are in isolation, they are infected, be careful when you are coming into inspection of our buildings, and that information was really helpful. But also we used official data from our ministry to have all the data, and all this data was used on a daily basis, and every case was geo-referenced into the database, so we can look out to the safety of our teams and not to spread the virus even worse. So in the case of someone who was infected or in self-isolation, they would usually open up all the windows. They will move away, wait for 15 to 20 minutes to get the fresh air. The damage assessment teams will look out the building with all the protection gear they have, the mask, the gloves and everything. They will make assessment, go away, and that was basically it. It was slightly worried to us how these protective measures are really useful in protecting the teams and populations, and we didn't know how exactly will that turn out. But around 2 or 3 weeks after the earthquake, we started to be sure that all the earthquake response didn't affect the spread of the virus, and all the numbers in the city was going down. It was going down. It was really a great news in a really bad situation. Maybe in some sense, when you have pandemic and earthquake in the same time, the people start to worry what's next, and they got really responsible. And most of that responsibility was also a great contribution that we have a really reliable data from them, and also the pandemic numbers was going down even if earthquake occurred 2 weeks ago. That was really great information from us. This is working blocks around the city. You can see there are a few types of them. That means their status. That means that this one is working block. This one is free, and most of the teams they can choose where they will work today. If there are no urgent priorities, they have a lot of freedom. So in this case, you can see some of the blocks are taken. That was used not to duplicate the work. So one team takes one block and works in that block. If other teams then must go to somewhere else. It was the safety precaution, also not to mix them too much, to keep the social distancing, but also to not make the duplicate work. Picture below is, you can see the COVID cases. I can't put more detailed information because of the data protection laws, and but it's not needed. You can see the teams managing through the pandemics, working into it. This is the map they had. They was aware all the time what's around them, and they really did a great job in a short time, and they did it in the safest way possible. So this is the remaining risk of falling materials. It's mostly done by drones. The whole city was filmed by drones. It was periodically done. And this is the locations from mostly chimneys and damaged materials from buildings that can fall off from aftershocks on some other events, and they needed to be quickly removed from the roofs. So most of the job done by firefighters and some of the civil protection teams that usually work in such environment. And this is few pictures of the removing the objects from the roofs. This is a map of firefighter interventions. There were around 3,300 in 20 days after earthquake. What is really incredible, because in 1 year, city of Zagreb have around 4,500 to 5,000 intervention. So how much is done in a less than a month? The picture below is showing drone footage from the firefighters. They take footage completely, the whole streets. They see the situation. They know where to climb, to take down. They have been supported by the headquarters in other locations. And it was all put on a map, put on a same map, and we really fast build all this database online to know where the critical location around the city was, and to reduce the remaining risk. On this slide you can see again the 3D model that really showed great. This is damage to assets categories. Usually everybody can understand. You have green, orange and red, three levels of damage, and it's used to have a bigger picture of the whole city. You can zoom in, zoom out, you can make a decision, you can make analysis, and it's a very visual and very good solution to have a clear picture of the current situation. All these damage assessments are put in a real time. So how the teams goes around the city, you can see the different buildings in different colors. So basically you can follow up their work with this map. And for the end, this is the tactical support model, our new toy. This is decision-making machine that will be used for the civil protection and decision makers. It will be very soon in service, and in this vehicle we will put all the Copernicus services also. You can see the antenna, you have the direct link and everything. You can even download the images faster, and this will be the future of the civil protection, where we will also do our part in getting the the information even better and clearer and see new possibility and to learn new things and make further development of crisis management. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question, you can ask me right away, or you can send an email or message on Twitter or association.
Thank you, Igor, for this fine presentation. Not only fine, but also very accurate and detailed, and describing the unfortunate event which happened in Zagreb. During the presentation, questions were submitted in a text box. So if we can deal with these questions, and I'm quite sure more questions will come up. And let's say we have about 10 minutes to do the Q&A session. And in case any information has to be shared on the recent cases, then feel free to do so. So I would like to go to the first question, which is submitted by Miguel. It says, how can we access the data shown in the presentation?
I think that there was a mention about fire data in that question. You can type in search Copernicus EFIS, and it will be Copernicus website. You can download all the maps, you have all the tutorials, and you also can go to the NASA web page is active fire data. You can there also put an email for notification for selected area. And basically, but if you type in EFIS Copernicus, you will find there everything, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I hope this answers your question, Miguel. Then we have a question from Christabel Anza. I will read it. With risk assessment using buildings, will it be good to factor the numbers of dwellers or even the land use? And how can you detect the use of building using remote? And then the question stops.
Yeah.
But,
you can detect building type by their height. So you can differentiate between buildings about above 3 floors, below 3 floors, and you can possibly group them into some categories. How much damage can you expect, and also how much people are living there. But all these risk assessments are combined with the official data of the population and the buildings. You have a lot of, in every country, a lot of data how the city was built and in which year. You can connect it with the current laws from that time, how these buildings were built. And you also can have about 9 or 10 categories. And then remote sensing is somewhere like secondary source of information supporting the national databases. So it's also the land use was used by the Korean Copernicus and also measured by satellites, but also a lot of local data was used also in this risk assessment. When you have a lot of data in your country, the satellites are only a plus. So when you combine all that, you're really improving the accuracy of all this risk assessment.
Okay, thank you. Then I would like to go to the next question from Miguel Angel. And it says, it refers to the several types of platforms to use within the remote sensing column. And it says, do you use drones or in-situ data to calibrate the satellite data to map flooded areas?
We didn't use drones. With this, we use Sentinel-1 to map flooded area. Maybe supported with the Sentinel-2, because if there are no clouds, Sentinel-1 is great because there are no clouds, and clouds are often in places just to make you a problem. So we used mostly Sentinel-1. It's very easy. There are some problems when it's heavily density of the buildings or some high grass in the water. That's the detection problem. But if you combine it with the Sentinel-2, you can see the difference and make more accurate map. Also, we mapped a really large area, so it was done fast. And with Sentinel-1, you did it in half an hour after you download the image. So we didn't use drones with that, but I can see a sense in questions and some problems they can be. And also we used open fields. We mapped open fields mostly. So it's really easy to extract the water layer from the radar image. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Then I would like to go to the question of Sue. You mentioned that Copernicus data are also used for forest fire prediction. The question is, of Sue is it the behavior of a simulation study or only for risk mapping? So how is Copernicus data being used?
It's more like a risk mapping. FIS is hazard, it's a fire weather, so you can know the hazard. For the risk mapping, you also need to have a basic terrain information. That's a lot of in-situ data. But to make simulation, the wind is the problem mostly. You need to have a really good in-situ sensors on the ground to make some projection how the fire will spread. And that was the biggest problem, because the wind in some location can change quickly. So you have places when it's easier to make a simulation, and some places where it's very difficult. But in the next few years, I think it will go in that direction. Yeah.
Okay. And then this is, I think, a very good question also from Marika Tashvili. It refers to the vegetation. So it's two ways, the question, 2 points. So what's the reason, the cause of the forest fires? Is it humans or is it spontaneous forest fires? And what's the difference between MODIS and Copernicus satellites in the NDVI and other vegetation indices?
Most of the fires occur when the human activity is on a high level. So there are not too many fires at night, but there are a lot of people everywhere. The human factor is really a big percentage of all fires. Yeah. So by accident or some other means, but humans are the biggest problems in that. Yeah. You need one to start a large fire, and that's basically it. In such weather conditions, when it's dry and a high wind, it spread really quickly, and it's a problem for all the countries in Europe and the world. It's basically the similar statistics. Yeah.
And do
the difference between MODIS and NGDVI. The MODIS is infrared sensor. And NGDVI is basically I done with the Sentinel-2, so it's an optical sensor. That's the difference. And but there is not much similarities between MODIS and mapping and measuring the vegetation. But there is about NGDVI and burn area mapping and also burn severity. It's very similar. You're using the really similar bands, and also when you're working with soil moisture, it's also very similar. So it's it's slightly different bands, but MODIS is completely another type of sensor. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for the very extensive answer to this, Igor. I was just thinking, after a disaster takes place, for example, the follow-up on the earthquake, how are you or the Emergency Management Services involved in adapting or assessing risk models?
After the earthquake, the priority was determining the remaining risk of falling objects, because earthquake follow-up is usually a large number of aftershocks, and damaged buildings can collapse. And basically, the time is the key. We had about 600 people on terrain, and they're all structural engineers from the construction field, and they were online server, and there was also a problem because of the pandemic. So human contact to a minimum. They had designated working blocks, so every team takes one, and it's working there. And also there was a big cooperation from the local population, because they knew how difficult situation is, and they really help us and provide us with really valuable information. And also we needed to manage the teams through a pandemic, and use the health ministry data, and also the data from the people. And people often say, yeah, I'm infected, be careful. I will move around, I will open the windows and wait for 20 minutes, and then there will be inspection. And the remaining risk, we used a lot of drone footage, and we activated the Copernicus Emergency Management Service. That service also used the drones, because when you have a really heavily damaged buildings, you can detect them with very high resolution satellites. But when you have minor damages and within, it's very difficult to see them with satellites. So you combine the satellite with the drone footage, and the most cases were identified in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And in this nightmare scenario, which you mentioned in your presentation, are there any forms or scripts for the international collaboration, or is it just an event which happened and you have to learn?
For most of the countries, this is something new. The speed of the spread, and at the beginning, nobody was really sure how deadly it is, and we all learned by working and exchanging information like on any other disasters. But the 112 number, European Association of 112 number, they posted a lot of good examples of the practices around the world, and some tutorials, and basically countries looked another, exchange information. Also, ministries work together, and the whole government. So it was at the start was a lot of information without details, but more and more everybody got really good at the response. Yeah.
Okay, so one final question from my side. Mm-hmm. With all the experience you have, you already had, of course, but now with the additional experience of those two, of the pandemic and the earthquake, what is your vision on future services, or rough ideas, or what pops up?
Yeah, I think that complex situation need to be studied more, and probably the some secondary effect of big disasters and how they mix together. There are really a few people who expected the earthquake and pandemic at the same time. It was mostly earthquake and flood or something like that, because it was really bad, and it was really all ended really good. But when you say someone at the start, they really anticipate the nightmare scenario. I think the Copernicus will develop more in the complex environment. In the next 5 years, it will basically change the way we see the world, and all these new images coming from Copernicus are really great. And I think the scientists will also use the data to find some connection we didn't see before. So it will be high accuracy in risk assessment with a lot of connections, and maybe to some long-term consequences we didn't see before. Yeah, and also
Okay.
a large development in the climate change predictions. Yeah.
Okay, we will learn about climate change and tomorrow in this session. So
Yeah.
this will bring us to the end of this session of the Emergency Management Services. So I would like to express my gratitude to Igor for your extensive presentation and well, answering your questions, sharing your knowledge. So to all the participants, I would say we hope you will join us tomorrow again at 10 o'clock. In case you have not registered yet for the sessions, please do so. And don't forget to use the hashtag #EOE Roadshow for all your outings on social media. So once again, Igor, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Looking forward to see you offline in months. And thanks for now. Stay safe and see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.